both are available. Okay, so here is what McGraw-Hill has published to tell us about rhythm.
Rhythm is an inherent part of life in the natural world. Rhythm can be generally described as a pattern that recurs over time. We can talk about the tidal rhythm of the oceans, or the rhythms of the orbiting planets, or of a ticking clock. Perhaps even more than pitch or tone, rhythm is fundamental to music. A regular and recurrent pulse is called a beat. Which allows time to be divided into equal units. A steady beat marks the passing of time and serves as a backdrop against which a composer can place notes of varying lengths. A melody that differs from the underlying beat has its own rhythm. We often can infer a beat from a melody, even if the beat isn't being performed. For example, let's hear a steady beat. Now let's hear a melody on top of the beat. Now I'll play the melody again without the aid of the metronome, but we can still feel the beat. Now, a steady beat would become boring fairly quickly if that's all we hear. Even a beautiful melody with an unchanging rhythm would grow tiring. Therefore, a melody can have notes that last a fraction of a beat or be held for several beats. To hear how rhythm differs from beat, let's listen to the beginning melody of the song America. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Each of the three syllables in the words my country lasts one beat. My country. And the words 'tis of lasts two beats. 'Tis lasts 1.5 beats, and of takes up the remaining half beat. 'Tis of thee. The note on sing is held for 3 beats. Of thee I sing. So in this melody, we have notes ranging from length from a half beat to 3 beats. Even though beat is a fundamental part of life in music, some music has a subtle or unclear beat, as in this case, with slower flowing music. Emily? Rhythm can be generally defined as the flow of music over time, and more specifically as the arrangement of note lengths in a piece of music. When listening to music, try and describe the nature of the rhythm. Is it slow, fast, irregular, floating, angular, jumpy? Our individual interpretations of rhythm can help us find personal meaning in a musical work.
Okay, so let's look at this slide here. So in his kind of recap there at the end of it, he gave us a definition of rhythm. So what how did he describe rhythm? What was the definition that he used there? Anybody remember? Have I lost all of you? Is everybody asleep? Fairly close. So the definition of rhythm that the book gives us, and what he said was, uh, rhythm is the flow of music through time. It can also be defined. Another way to define it is as the durations of the sounds or silence. So when we talk about rhythm, we're talking about how long each note or each sound is being played, whether it's a note or a specific sound, a hand clap or a drum beat or something like that. We're talking about the durations of the sounds or the silence. Okay. The beat of the music is the regular recurrent pulsation that divides the music into equal units of time. So it's a recurrent pulsation that divides music into equal units of time. Okay, so I'm going to grab my guitar, and if I play some chords in a rhythm on the guitar, while I'm playing that, you could probably tap your foot to what I'm doing. And that foot tapping is what defines the beat. Okay, so the regular pulsation in that is what defines the beat. Okay, so I'm going to number the beats and I'm going to count them while I'm playing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that regular pulse is the beat of the music. And then a meter is how we is the way that we divide the beats up. So whether we divide it into groups of 4 or groups of 3. So the definition of meter there is the organization of beats into regular groups. Into regular groups. The organization of beats into regular groups. So when I was playing, yeah, geez, it's gone crazy. Stop. So whenever I was playing there, we could organize those into groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or we could organize them into groups of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Though I think it makes more sense to organize them into groups of 4 because I'm playing 4 beats per chord. But either way, we usually will organize them into groups of 2, 3, or 4. If I do groups of 3, it sounds very different. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it feels very different whenever we organize it into 3. So meter is organizing the beats into regular groups. And we've got another little short video here about meter.
The organization of beats into specific groupings is called a meter. When a specific number of beats in a group is defined as a single unit, it is known as a measure. In a musical score, measures are indicated by vertical lines called bar lines. There are as many different types of meters as there are numbers, but practically speaking, most music features regular groupings of a small number of beats. Duple meter can be defined as groupings of 2 beats per measure. When 3 beats are grouped into one unit, it is known as triple meter. One of the most common meters is quadruple meter, in which there are 4 beats per measure. This meter can be heard in most rock, pop, and jazz music. For example, this beat is in quadruple meter. Let's count the beats together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Duple and quadruple meters often carry a feeling of walking or marching and have a certain solidness that feels stabilizing. Triple meter, on the other hand, often feels more propulsive. A waltz, for example, is in triple meter. This music makes our bodies want to move. The meter of a piece of music is indicated in a score by the time signature. The important number here is the top one, which indicates that there are 3 beats per measure. Often in meters, the first beat of each measure is stressed the most strongly. This beat is called the downbeat. Let's hear that waltz again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hear the emphasis on the downbeat? This is an important beat, especially when we're trying to dance to music. Music can also make use of unusual meters, such as quintuple meter, which is 5 beats per measure, sextuple meter, which is 6 beats per measure, or even septuple meter, which is 7 beats per measure. Another type of meter is irregular meter, which features unequal groupings of the beat, such as 3 plus 2 plus 3. This approach produces a very angular and disjointed rhythm to the music. Many composers, such as Igor Stravinsky or Frank Zappa, will change meters often, sometimes every measure. Beats can also be broken down into subdivisions or offbeats. Really, beats can be subdivided in nearly endless ways, but let's take 2 simple examples. First, let's divide each beat of a quadruple meter into 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And now let's divide each beat into 4. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a.
Okay, so hopefully that kind of explained meter a little bit. So if we look at the next slide here, he talked about time signature. So what does the top number of a time signature tell us? If I say we're in 3/4 time, what is that top number telling us? Good. How many beats are in the measure? Good. So in 3/4 time, how many beats do we have in a measure? It looks like Thomas already answered that. So we have 3 beats in the measure in 3/4 time. In 4/4 time, we have 4 beats. In 5/4 time, we have 5 beats. That's all we really need to worry about. We're not going to dive too much into the more complex time signatures or anything for this class. So he did use some terms, though, that we are going to use pretty regularly in this class, and that's duple, triple, and quadruple meters. So it should be fairly obvious, but just to double check, duple meter has how many beats? 2. Triple has 3, and quadruple has 4. So if you see those terms, very good. Thank you guys for jumping in there. If you see those terms, then you'll be pretty aware that that's what they're talking about there. Shouldn't be anything too groundbreaking with that. Okay? Good. So what is an accent in music? We talked about this when we talked about dynamics. What does accent mean? If I accent a note, what am I doing to it? Yeah. So an accent is an emphasis on a beat or a note. So I'll grab my guitar again. So if we're accenting, or if I'm playing just this simple chord progression again, I'll just keep with the same chord progression, keep it easy. And if I don't accent any notes, it'll sound like this. Which is pretty boring, right? But if I start to put accent on certain notes, it starts to give us the groove that we're used to hearing with music. So we start to hear that accent. In that case, I was doing what's called a tresillo rhythm, where you have 1 and 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 4. Okay, so we start to feel that accent a little bit. Syncopation is going to be where we accent notes that are a little bit weirder, that we accent notes other than the strong beats or unexpected notes. Unexpected. There we go. I can't spell. So if we accent the weak beat or the unexpected notes, that's what kind of gives things a dance feel. In fact, the tresillo rhythm I was just using is a syncopated rhythm. 1 and 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 4. If you listen to dance music or pop music, they tend to use a lot of accents where you get something like So in that case, I'm putting 5 different notes, 5 different accents inside of a measure of 4/4 time, which is going to feel a little bit weird. Okay, but it sounds good to us. We're used to that. You might get something like. So there's a lot of different accents and rhythms in there, a lot of different accented rhythms, which makes it syncopated. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about tempo. So before we talk about tempo, I've got another short video here. This guy's just full of great stuff.
We use the term tempo to describe the pace of a piece of music, specifically the speed of the beat. There is almost no limit to how fast or slow the tempo of a musical work can be. To be sure, a human performer can only play so fast, but non-human performers, especially electronic instruments like computers or synthesizers, can be programmed to play blindingly fast or unimaginably slow. One piece by John Cage, appropriately titled As Slow as Possible, reveals one of the slowest tempos in human-created music. One performance of the piece, an organ rendition at St. Burkhardi Church in Germany, began in 2001 and is not scheduled to finish until the year 2640. As with dynamic markings, Tempo indications are commonly found in Italian. A few important ones are largo, meaning very slow, adagio, meaning slow, andante, which means moderate, more of a walking pace, allegro, meaning fast, and presto, which means very fast. There are also ways to indicate whether a tempo should be played slightly faster or slower than normal. Two frequently used qualifiers are molto, which means much, and non troppo, which means not too much. For example, adagio molto indicates a very slow tempo, but not quite as slow as largo. And allegro non troppo calls for a fast but not too fast tempo. These tempo markings are not an exact science, as performers bring their own individual interpretations to them. Since the invention of the metronome in the early 1800s, composers can indicate the exact tempo of a musical piece in beats per minute. For example, the markings on this metronome indicate that andante, a moderate pace, can range anywhere from 76 beats per minute to 108 beats. Tempo is often tied closely to the mood of the music and functions as a highly expressive aspect of a musical performance. As musicians, we can fluctuate tempo to bring out emotional content. Let's hear Emily play an excerpt, varying the tempo to convey expressive meaning. When a performer gradually speeds up the tempo of the music, it is known as accelerando. Conversely, when a performer slows down the tempo, it is known as retardando. Notice the expressive effect that each of these techniques conveys.
Okay, so when we talk about tempo, how do we measure tempo? What is tempo measured in? What's the unit that we use there? If we're talking about an exact tempo, we might say that it's 120 or 60 or 80 something. What is that something? Good. Beats per minute. So we measure that in beats per minute, which you usually see as BPM. In fact, a lot of, if you download a song on iTunes and you actually look at the metadata of that file, a lot of times it'll tell you what the BPM is on there. It's buried in that metadata somewhere. So there's actually some algorithms that different programs use to figure out, if you're exercising, it's going to make a playlist that's all a certain number of BPMs, around a certain BPMs, to kind of keep you going and keep you active. Okay, so we measure it in beats per minute. The tempo is the speed of the piece, as he said there. It's the speed of the beat measured in beats per minute. And the easiest beats per minute to figure out is 60 beats per minute, because if it's 60 beats per minute, then it's one beat for every what? Yeah, 60 BPM equals one beat per second. We can figure that out if we have a clock or anything that has a second tick to it. We could figure out what beats per minute is, or if you have a pretty good feel for how long a second is. So it'd be about, so that would be about 60 beats per minute. And that's a pretty slow pace. That's a pretty slow tempo. If we double that, though, we get our standard march tempo, which is 120 beats per minute. Should be about right there. Now, what I can do if I need to know an exact tempo is actually, I'll just share it this way. There's actually a website that is free called metronomeonline.com, and it will tell me whatever beat per minute that I might need to find. So let's see how close I was. Let's find 120 beats per minute. I think I might have been dead on. The old band director skills are still there. They're still kicking in there, which is good to know. Um, so if we go at a faster BPM, if we go up to 176, you can hear that that's a lot faster, whereas like 50 is very slow. Now, one of the handy things about this website is that it also includes some of the terms that we see used instead of exact beats per minute. So, in especially older music, composers were not so picky about the exact beats per minute they wanted you to go. Instead, they would use some Italian terms. And you can see some of those terms here. Allegro, andante, adagio, moderato, presto, largo, larghetto, or prestissimo. So all of those kind of fall within certain ranges of beats per minute. And all you need to know is kind of generally what those mean from fast to slow or from slow to fast. So our slowest metronome markings are largo. Adagio is more kind of an easy or slower pace. Andante is like a walking pace, kind of a moderate pace, as is moderato. Allegro gets up a little bit faster, from about 120 to 160 or so is considered allegro. Presto is going to be even faster than that. Sometimes we also see terms like vivace, which means lively and fast. So it's going to have even more of an up kick to it there. Okay, so metronomeonline.com is pretty handy. There's also tons of metronome apps that you can use if you ever need to find a specific BPM or something of something. If you're DJing or whatever, and you want to figure out, different BPMs to be able to line up different tracks together, it is pretty handy to have. Okay, what is next? All right, so next up, we're going to talk a little bit about musical notation. And musical notation might seem scary to you because you've never done it before, but it's really not that difficult. Okay, so we use in musical notation in Western music, we use letter names to give us specific pitches. What are the letters that we use in the musical alphabet? This is a test question, by the way, so you'll need to know this. Good. We use the first 7 letters of the alphabet, or A through G. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Very good. So as we go higher in pitch, we're going up the alphabet to go higher in pitch. Okay? So if I start at A on my trusty Martin acoustic, and I go up the letters, you'll hear that the pitch gets higher. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then that brings us back to A. Okay? Now, you may have noticed there that I come back around to A, but it sounds higher. That's because we've gone up an octave, which we talked about in the when we talked about intervals, and we talked about pitch and frequency and all that stuff. What happens to the frequency if we go up an octave? If we go from this A to this A, what happens to the frequency there? It doubles. Good. All right. So in the musical alphabet, we use the first 7 letters. Okay. Now, when we're notating music, we have treble clef and we have bass clef. And the treble clef looks like this, and the bass clef looks like this. So, what notes does the treble clef is the treble clef usually used for? Good. So the treble clef is usually used for higher pitch, and the bass clef is usually used for lower pitch. So with most of our instruments, we can kind of figure out what they're going to use, if they're going to use treble clef or bass clef. So for instance, in the brass family, our trumpets and our French horns are going to use treble clef because they're the highest pitched brass instruments. And then tuba and trombone are going to use the bass clef because they're lower in pitch. Now, what's handy about the clefs is that it actually tells you how to read the notes. So our treble clef, if you know the other name of the treble clef, which is the G clef, it actually tells you where to find the note G. So the treble clef, the little loop-de-loop on the bottom, goes around the second space from the second line from the bottom, which is the note G. In fact, here's a fun little fact for you. This always blows people's mind. The original treble clef way back in the day looked like that. Well, what is that? You guys might be young enough that you have no idea what that symbol is. It's a cursive G. Yeah. So in the original music notation, they used this cursive G. Oh, and I did a terrible job. I didn't aim it right. Dang, I quit. Maybe if I just make it a little bigger, it'll fit. There we go. They used a cursive G with the bottom loop going around. It's really hard to draw with a mouse, by the way. With the little bottom loop going around that line, and that eventually got stylized into what we now see as the regular treble clef. So if you know where that is, then you can figure out all the other notes of the alphabet. So if the second line is G, as we go down, we're going to go lower. So if I go down to the next space below G, what note is that going to be? F. And then the next line is going to be E. And then right under the staff is going to be D. If I go up from G, what comes after G in the musical alphabet? A. And then we keep going up. B, C, D, E, F, and back to G, sitting on top of the staff. Okay? The bass clef actually tells us how to read the notation as well. Sometimes we call the bass clef the F clef because it tells us where the note F is. The note F is in between the two dots. And again, originally it was a stylized F that eventually got turned into what we now see as our standard bass clef. Okay, so again, we can find all the other notes by going from there. If we go down, it goes E, D, C, B, A, G. If we go up, we have F, G, A, and B. And if we put those together, we get what is called the grand staff. And this is what a pianist will look at whenever they read music. Okay, they see all of these notes together, both the treble clef and the bass clef. And if you think about it, when you sit down at a piano, the lower side of the piano is on the left side. So the bottom staff, the bass clef, is what they're going to play with the left hand. The treble clef is what they're going to play with the right hand, because that's where the higher notes are on the piano. Now, if both hands are playing down in the low register, you might actually see two bass clefs there. Or if both hands are playing up in the high register, it might be two treble clefs. That's all that means, is that they're just playing up high. But when we look at the grand staff, we can find all of the note names of the bass and treble clef. Now, you do not have to memorize this at all. I'm not going to be like, what is this note, on a test or anything like that. Just kind of have a vague idea of how it works, so that if you're looking at sheet music, you can kind of tell if the melody's going up or down or whatever is happening there. That's all you really need to stress too much about. Okay. Now, I don't have any more videos, but I am going to go over to the book to show you. I heard a ding. Let me see what the. Oh, no problem, Flora. I have this recorded, so if you need to go back in and watch later on, you can. So all you need to know about notating rhythms is that everything is mathematically divided by itself. Okay. So our basic unit of rhythm is the whole note. Okay, which looks like a football. And I know that's a little bit small. If I zoom in here, does that look a little bit better for you guys? So the whole note is our basic unit. It is one whole. Okay. And in 4/4 time, that's going to be 4 beats long. It takes up the whole measure. And that can be divided into 2 half notes. We take the whole, we cut it into 2 halves. That makes sense, right? And then if we divide that out, we take the halves and we divide them into quarters. And then if we divide that, we get eighths. Now, with eighth notes, they have a little flag attached to them if they're by themselves. But if we put them together, we actually beam them together, as you can see here. And then we go even further, dividing that into 16th notes, which have 2 little flags or 2 beams. And that's all you really need to know. If you can kind of get a vague idea of what what's happening there, then you should be good to go. And then if we take a dotted note, we're going to add half of the duration of the beat back onto it. So a dotted quarter note is going to take the length of a quarter note plus half of a quarter note, which is an eighth note. So a dotted quarter note would be the same length as 3 eighth notes. So again, don't stress too much about it. When we notate silence, we use rests. These are what some of the rests look like. You can see them in your book. Don't be stressed about music notation. You're not going to have to worry too much about that. And that's pretty much where I wanted to get today. So we have hit the end of our time allotment here. So I have this recorded. If you want to go back and look at it, go ahead. If you have any questions, please email me. I'll stick around for another couple of minutes after I send you off if you have any questions to ask. Otherwise, I will see you on Friday, and then exam 1 will be available after that. We'll finish up part 1 on Friday. Have a great day, and you're free to go.